Hello friend, welcome to Stories by Tochi. We bring you interesting folk tales. Please don't forget to hit the like button, please share, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for doing so. Now let's get into the story. I heard the soft moans before I even opened the door. My heart pounded, my hands trembling as I pushed it open. There she was, my wife, half-dressed, tangled up with a man I didn't recognize. She turned at the sound, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, frozen in place. But I wasn't surprised. Not after everything I had learned. Not after I found out that the child I had loved and raised as my own was never mine to begin with. Nathan never thought he'd be the kind of man to give up his career. He had spent years building his reputation at work, moving up the ranks, and providing for his family. It was exhausting, but it felt right until Claire got the promotion that changed everything. She was ecstatic when she told him, her eyes shining with excitement, her hands gripping his as she explained what this meant for their future. "You don't have to work anymore," she had said, her voice filled with reassurance. "I'll take care of everything. The kids need one of us at home, and it just makes sense." He hesitated, not because he didn't love his children, but because it felt like giving up a part of himself. Still, Claire's logic was sound, and in the end, love for his family outweighed his pride. He quit his job the following month, reassuring himself that he was doing the right thing. At first, it felt like a dream. Mornings were filled with laughter as he got the kids ready for the day. He prepared their meals, took Liam to preschool, and cradled Ava for her afternoon naps. He documented every moment, sending Claire pictures and videos, expecting her to share in his joy. But as the weeks passed, her replies grew shorter, her responses delayed. "Busy," she would text. "Meeting." Some nights she came home too tired to engage in conversation, only offering a quick peck on the cheek before disappearing into the bedroom. Nathan told himself it was just an adjustment period, that Claire was still finding balance in her new role. He made excuses for her absence, convincing himself that she was working late for their future. He ignored the empty feeling that crept into his chest when she left early and returned late. The weight of it all began to settle in when he realized just how much of himself he had sacrificed. His days blurred into one another. Breakfast, cleaning, errands, school drop-offs, dinner, and then waiting for Claire to come home. He had no colleagues to talk to, no work projects to challenge his mind, just the constant cycle of parenting, while Claire thrived in her career. The imbalance gnawed at him, but he swallowed his feelings, determined to be the pillar his family needed. He reassured himself that this was temporary, that Claire appreciated him, that everything would even out in time. But deep down, beneath the exhaustion and routine, a quiet fear took root, a fear that he had given up everything for a woman who was slowly slipping away. Nathan had always believed that love thrived on effort, on the little things that held a marriage together. He made Claire's coffee just the way she liked it every morning, left notes in her work bag, and asked about her day, even when she barely looked up from her phone. But as time passed, the warmth in their home began to fade. Claire's late nights became more frequent, her excuses more rehearsed. She was always needed at work, always too drained for conversation when she returned. The once effortless intimacy between them became awkward and forced, like they were playing roles in a marriage neither of them fully occupied anymore. Nathan noticed the change in her eyes, the way she no longer looked at him with the same admiration she once did. It was subtle at first, a delayed smile, a distracted nod, but over time, it became undeniable. She was there, but never really present. It wasn't just the marriage that suffered, it was the children too. Liam asked for his mother constantly, his little face lighting up whenever he heard the front door, only to fall when Claire rushed past him, muttering about being exhausted. Ava, still too young to understand, simply adapted, clinging to Nathan as if sensing he was the only constant in her world. Dinner conversations became one-sided, with Nathan filling the silence as Claire scrolled through her phone, barely listening. When he brought up her absence, she brushed him off, irritated by his concern. "I'm working for us," she would snap. "Why can't you just appreciate that?" It was the first time Nathan felt like a burden instead of a partner. The first time he questioned whether Claire truly saw him anymore. The woman he had sacrificed his career for, the woman he had trusted to keep their family together, was slipping through his fingers like sand. The loneliness settled in like an unwelcome guest, lingering in the quiet moments of the day. Nathan missed the person he used to be, the man who had purpose beyond fatherhood. He missed having conversations that weren't one-sided, missed feeling like an equal in his marriage. The worst part was knowing that Claire didn't seem to notice, or worse, that she did notice, but didn't care. He tried to convince himself it was just a phase, that once she adjusted to her new responsibilities, things would return to normal. But deep down, beneath the routine of childcare and chores, an unsettling feeling grew, one that whispered of a truth he wasn't ready to face. Claire was no longer just distant. She was gone in a way that had nothing to do with work. The night Liam fell ill, Nathan barely had time to think. One moment, his son was playing on the floor, his small hands clutching a toy car, and the next, he was burning with fever, his tiny body trembling in Nathan's arms. He tried everything, cool compresses, fever reducers, but nothing seemed to help. Claire was still at work, not answering her phone, and as the hours dragged on, Nathan's worry turned into full-blown panic. By the time midnight struck, he had no choice but to bundle Liam up and drive to the hospital. He sat in the sterile waiting room, his son's labored breathing the only sound he could focus on, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. He told himself Claire would call back any minute, that she would rush to the hospital, worried sick. But his phone remained silent. The doctor's voice was calm as he explained the test results, but nothing could have prepared Nathan for what he heard. Liam's fever was under control, but something else had surfaced in the routine blood work. "Are you certain you're the biological father?" the doctor asked, his expression carefully neutral. The words didn't make sense at first, bouncing around in Nathan's mind like a cruel joke. "There's no genetic match," the doctor continued, oblivious to the way Nathan's entire world had just tilted on its axis. "You may want to discuss this with your wife." The hospital lights felt too bright, the walls too white, everything suddenly too sharp and unforgiving. He looked down at Liam, still asleep in his arms, his innocent face peaceful despite the storm raging inside Nathan. His son, the boy he had held as a newborn, rocked to sleep, taught how to walk, except he wasn't his son at all. By the time Nathan drove home, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles ached, his mind was already unraveling the lies. The sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the way Claire had so easily pushed him into the role of full-time father, it all made sense now. She hadn't asked him to quit his job because she needed him to take care of their children. She had done it to trap him, to keep him tied to a child that wasn't his. Anger curled in his stomach, but beneath it was something far worse, grief. Grief for the life he thought he had, for the family he had built on a foundation of deception. He glanced at Liam in the rearview mirror, his small chest rising and falling with steady breaths, and a lump formed in his throat. No matter what the truth was, he loved that boy. But love, he realized, wasn't enough to erase betrayal, and this betrayal had only just begun. Nathan sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at his sleeping son on the couch. His mind was a battlefield, torn between love and betrayal. Liam had curled up beside him after they returned from the hospital, his small hand gripping Nathan's shirt, trusting and unaware. How many nights had he rocked this boy to sleep, soothed his tears, and whispered promises of always being there. And now he knew the truth. Liam was never his to begin with. The weight of it pressed against his chest, suffocating. He wanted to believe there was some mistake, some scientific error, but the doctor had been certain. A part of him wanted to shake Claire awake and demand answers, but another part, the part still grasping at the last shreds of his reality, was terrified of what she might say. He wasn't ready to hear her confirm the betrayal, not yet. Claire didn't come home that night. When Nathan finally climbed into bed, exhaustion weighing him down, he found the other side cold and untouched. Her absence wasn't unusual anymore. She had perfected the art of slipping in and out of their home as if she were a guest rather than a wife. He knew where she was, work as always, or at least that's what she wanted him to believe. Nathan had ignored the inconsistencies in her stories for months, convincing himself that her career demanded sacrifices. But now, with the truth about Liam hanging over him, he couldn't ignore the nagging voice in his head anymore. He replayed moments he had dismissed, the late-night calls she never explained, the business trips that never seemed necessary, the way she avoided intimacy as if even touching him was an inconvenience. He had been blind. Willingly blind. But not anymore. The next morning, Claire strolled in as if nothing had happened, setting her keys down on the counter and stretching as she sighed, long night. Nathan sat at the dining table, watching her, studying every movement, every word. He wanted to scream at her, demand the truth, throw the DNA results in her face. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he asked, "Do you even know what happened last night?" She frowned, distractedly reaching for her phone. "What do you mean?" He clenched his jaw, waiting for even a flicker of concern, but she just scrolled through her messages, barely looking at him. Liam had to go to the hospital. She froze for a second, then quickly recovered. "Oh, is he okay?" The coldness in her voice sent a chill down his spine. That was the moment Nathan knew Claire wasn't just lying about Liam. She had stopped caring altogether. Nathan had always believed that betrayal came with warning signs, shifts in behavior, lingering guilt, hesitation in speech. But Claire had none of that. She moved through the house as if nothing had changed, as if her entire marriage wasn't teetering on the edge of destruction. That morning, after brushing off Liam's hospital visit like it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience, she had showered, dressed, and kissed Ava on the forehead before heading out for another busy day at work. Nathan watched her walk away, her confidence unshaken, her lies so deeply woven into the fabric of their life that she had no reason to suspect he knew. That was what unsettled him the most, not just the deception, but the ease with which she carried it. She had been living in this secret reality for so long that the truth no longer burdened her. For days, Nathan operated in silence, keeping his rage buried beneath forced smiles and measured conversations. He observed everything now, the way Claire avoided looking him in the eye, the way she spent more time getting ready in the mornings, the way her phone was always face down on the counter. He started checking the call logs, noting the repeated numbers she dialed late at night. He followed her digital footprints, credit card charges at restaurants she never mentioned, rideshare receipts leading to locations that weren't her office. Every discovery was another nail in the coffin, another confirmation of what he had already come to suspect. But it wasn't enough. He needed more than suspicions and bank statements. He needed proof, undeniable proof, before he confronted her. And so he waited, even as the weight of what he knew threatened to consume him. The final push came unexpectedly. That evening, as Nathan prepared dinner, Ava clapped her hands from her high chair, babbling nonsense words. Liam, still recovering, sat at the table, quietly coloring. Claire was supposed to be home hours ago. Instead, she texted a single word, late. No apology, no explanation, just another excuse. Nathan exhaled slowly, pressing his fingers against the counter to steady himself. Then, without hesitation, he took his phone and called her. It rang twice before going straight to voicemail. He called again. Same result. Something inside him snapped. He grabbed his jacket, kissed Ava on the forehead, and told Liam he would be right back. Then, without another thought, he walked out the door and into the night, determined to find out exactly where Claire really was. Nathan had never been the jealous type. He had always trusted Claire, given her space, and believed in the foundation of their marriage. But as he drove toward her office, guided by pure instinct and the gnawing ache in his gut, he knew that trust had been misplaced. The city lights blurred past him, each red light an agonizing pause in his growing certainty. He didn't know what he expected to find, but he knew it wouldn't be innocent. His hands tightened around the steering wheel as he remembered all the moments he had ignored, the unexplained work trips, the fading intimacy, the way she'd barely looked at him anymore. He had been a fool, but tonight he would no longer be blind. He would see the truth with his own eyes, no matter how much it destroyed him. Pulling into the nearly empty parking lot of Claire's office building, Nathan felt his pulse hammering in his throat. Most of the windows were dark, but on the top floor, a faint glow spilled from the glass. His stomach twisted. He knew that light, Claire's office. But she wasn't alone. As he stepped out of the car, the weight of his suspicion solidified into something real, something undeniable. He moved cautiously, his footsteps quiet against the pavement. The glass walls of the building made it impossible to hide what was happening inside. And there they were, Claire and a man he recognized from the few times he had visited her office. They weren't working late. They weren't going over reports. They were tangled together, bodies pressed in a way that left no room for doubt. For a moment, Nathan couldn't move. The air left his lungs in a silent exhale, his heart slamming against his ribs with violent force. There it was, the confirmation he had dreaded yet needed. The world around him faded, reduced to nothing but the sight of his wife with another man. He expected rage, expected an uncontrollable urge to storm inside and tear the scene apart. But all he felt was a hollow, numbing emptiness. The betrayal wasn't just about the act itself. It was about everything, the lies, the manipulation, the way she had built an entire life on deceit. And worst of all, she had done it so effortlessly. Claire had never loved him the way he had loved her. She had never even respected him enough to be careful. Standing there in the shadows, watching the last remnants of his marriage crumble, Nathan knew this wasn't just the end of his relationship. This was the beginning of something far worse. Nathan didn't remember driving home. His body moved on autopilot, but his mind was caught in an endless loop, replaying what he had just seen. Claire pressed against her coworker, her hands tangled in his shirt, her lips moving in whispered words that had once belonged to him. He had expected anger to consume him, to take over his every thought, but all he felt was a crushing hollowness, a void where his love for her used to be. By the time he walked through the front door, the house was dark and silent. Liam and Ava were asleep, their small breaths filling the space with a peace he could no longer feel. He stood there for a long time, staring at the home he had built, at the life he had devoted himself to. And in that moment he made a decision. Claire would not get to walk away from this unscathed. Hours passed before she finally came home. Nathan sat at the kitchen table, waiting, his fingers wrapped around the cold edge of his coffee cup. When the front door creaked open, Claire entered like she always did, without guilt, without hesitation. She set her purse down, stretched her arms, and sighed. "Long night," she muttered. The words were a knife to his chest, not because of their meaning, but because of how easily she said them, how effortlessly she lied. Nathan exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. "Yeah," he said, voice even. "I bet it was." Claire paused for a fraction of a second before turning to face him. Her expression remained neutral, but he saw it, the flicker of unease in her eyes. He had never questioned her before, never given her a reason to be afraid. But tonight, things were different. Nathan didn't ease into it. He didn't dance around the truth, or give her an opportunity to twist it into something else. "I saw you," he said, his voice sharp, cutting through the silence like glass. Claire froze. For the first time in months, she had nothing to say. No excuse, no dismissive remark, no rehearsed explanation. Just silence. And that silence was louder than any confession. Nathan stood up, pushing his chair back with slow deliberation. "You lied about Liam," he continued, his voice unwavering. "You lied about your job. You lied about everything." Claire's lips parted, but no words came. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even ashamed. And that was all Nathan needed to know. He had spent years giving her everything, sacrificing himself for their family, only to find out she had never been his to begin with. But now it was over, and Claire was about to lose everything. Claire blinked, her expression unreadable, but Nathan saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even afraid. She was calculating, measuring his reaction, searching for an angle to manipulate her way out of this. The realization hit him like a gut punch. Even now, standing in the ruins of their marriage, she wasn't remorseful. She was simply inconvenienced. "Say something," he said, his voice calmer than he expected. Claire exhaled, running a hand through her hair as if this was nothing more than a mild misunderstanding. "Nathan," she sighed, shaking her head, "it's complicated." He almost laughed. Complicated. That was the word she chose? As if their entire life together hadn't been shattered by her choices. "No," he said, stepping forward. "It's simple. You cheated. You lied. And you used me to raise a child that isn't even mine." Her face twitched at that. For the first time, he saw a crack in her composure. "Liam is yours," she argued, her voice sharper now, but Nathan shook his head. "Don't," he warned. "I know the truth. I had him tested at the hospital." Claire's mouth snapped shut, her lips pressing into a thin line. She had nothing left to hide behind. No excuses. No lies that could undo the damage. The weight of her silence settled between them, thick and suffocating. "So what now?" she finally asked, crossing her arms. It was a challenge, not an apology. Nathan stared at her, feeling the last remnants of love he once had for her wither and die. She wasn't asking because she wanted to fix things. She was asking because she wanted to know how much damage control she needed to do. And that was when Nathan knew. He was done. Completely irreversibly done. "I'm filing for divorce," he said, and this time Claire reacted. Her eyes widened, her body stiffening. "Nathan, wait." But he didn't wait. He walked past her, heading toward the bedroom, where his suitcase sat untouched in the closet. He had clung to this marriage, to the hope that things could be fixed, for far too long. He had stayed for the kids, for the love he thought was real, for the life he had sacrificed so much to build. But now he was leaving for himself. Claire called his name again, her voice rising, but he ignored her. Let her scream. Let her panic. It didn't matter anymore. The woman he had loved was gone, and in her place stood a stranger who had never truly been his. And for the first time in years, Nathan felt something close to freedom. Nathan barely registered Claire's voice as she trailed behind him, her words desperate but empty. "Nathan, let's talk about this," she pleaded, her tone laced with something resembling urgency, but not regret, not love. He ignored her, moving through the house with purpose, pulling open drawers, grabbing only the essentials. He wasn't interested in drawn-out fights or theatrical displays of emotion. Claire had already shown him who she truly was, and there was nothing left to say. She had expected him to be like before, to back down, to stay, to forgive. But she had miscalculated. He was no longer the man willing to sacrifice himself for a lie. He had wasted years believing in a family that had never truly been his. Now he was done playing the fool. Claire's panic escalated when she realized he wasn't bluffing. "You're overreacting," she snapped, her voice rising. "This isn't just about you. What about the kids? What about Liam?" At that, Nathan stilled, his grip tightening around the handle of his suitcase. Liam, his son in every way except blood. The thought of leaving him, of walking away from the little boy who had known him as a father since birth, sent a deep piercing ache through his chest. But then he remembered the doctor's words, the DNA test, the cold truth. Liam had never been his. Claire had made sure of that. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Don't you dare use Liam to guilt me," he said, his voice low and firm. "You lied to me. You used me. You never once thought about what this would do to me, or to him." Claire's mouth opened, then closed, her face twisting in frustration. She had no defense. Silence stretched between them, heavy and final. Nathan exhaled, forcing himself to steady his thoughts. "I'll fight for Ava," he said, voice unwavering. "But Liam," his throat tightened, "you made sure I had no right to him." He saw something flicker in Claire's eyes then, realization perhaps, a glimpse of understanding that, for once, she wouldn't win, that he was serious, that the life she had so carelessly shattered wouldn't be pieced back together. He moved past her, dragging his suitcase behind him, his heart pounding with every step toward the door. Claire didn't stop him this time. She didn't reach for him. She didn't beg. And that was the final confirmation that leaving was the only choice he had left. Nathan stepped outside, inhaling the cold night air, as if it were the first real breath he had taken in years. The house behind him, the one he had built with love, patience, and trust, felt like a prison he was finally escaping. He walked to his car, threw his suitcase in the back seat, and gripped the steering wheel for a long moment, his knuckles white against the leather. The weight of everything pressed down on him, the betrayal, the lies, the years wasted on a woman who had never been his in the way he had once believed. But there was no turning back now. He had seen the truth, and no amount of denial could undo it. The hardest part wasn't leaving Claire. It was leaving Liam, his son in every way except blood. The boy who had curled up in his lap when he was sick, who had called him Daddy with pure, unwavering trust. The boy who had no idea the world he knew was about to shatter. His phone vibrated on the dashboard, Claire's name flashing across the screen. He didn't answer. He knew what she wanted, to twist the narrative, to manipulate, to make herself the victim in a story she had written with her own selfish hands. He let the call ring out, his heart heavy but resolute. The court battle ahead would be brutal. Claire wouldn't let Ava go without a fight. But Nathan was ready. He had given too much of himself to a woman who had never deserved it. Now his only focus was his daughter. She was his blood, his responsibility, his reason to fight. Liam would always have a place in his heart, but Claire had ensured that Nathan had no claim to him. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. But it was the truth, and Nathan was done fighting against reality. As he pulled out of the driveway, he took one last look at the house, the place where he had once dreamed of growing old with his family. That dream was dead now, and maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. Because now he could build something new, something real. The road stretched ahead, dark and uncertain, but for the first time in years, Nathan wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. He was free, and that was enough. Hope you enjoyed this interesting story. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. See you again in my next story.